Welcome in to another episode of Mountaineer Report, brought to you by West Virginia Sports Now. Mike Asti, that is Luke Blain, and the Ross Hodge era has now tipped off. So we now have a game to discuss, and more games coming up, but a game to discuss here on this edition of the show. And maybe, just maybe, the football team is interesting, at least, as the regular season comes to an end. To get right into it here, again, Mike Asti, Luke Blain, Mountaineer Report, available everywhere you get your podcasts, and of course throughout the West Virginia Sports Now family of networks, including YouTube here, as we are streaming live, and the recording will then be available everywhere you get your podcasts. We are going to start with Mountaineer basketball. Ross Hodge and his group, they get a victory. Luke was there covering for us, as he will be for most games, and we have some big games coming up on the schedule. Not really the next couple, but the Brawl. They're going to face Ohio State. They're going to be in Charleston. The out-of-conference schedule is kind of interesting, maybe more so than most years, before they get into Big 12 play at the turn of the year. Some positives, some negatives. Mountaineer fans had to wipe sweat off their brow, kind of scared that maybe a really bad upset would occur. A good team would have been, who they would have lost to. They did face kind of a good team, a tournament caliber team, but still a mid-major that you don't want to lose to open up your era. So, Luke, you threw a takeaways story up. You covered it. What are your takeaways from what you've seen so far from Ross Hodge's team? The pros, the cons, the surprises, maybe? Interesting comments that you heard from Hodge and any of the players?
Yeah, looking at taking away from this game, I think one of the main takeaways is they are still very much figuring things out on the offensive end. Hodge mentioned that, defense a lot of times comes before offense when it comes to setting up systems and things like that.
Yeah.
Offense is a bit more complex, and we saw it last night. And a lot of that was from, like Jasper Floyd also mentioned, them Mount St. Mary's taking away the passing lanes for WVU. That's what resulted him scoring more, finished the night with 25 points, also had 5 steals and 4 assists. So a good night for Jasper Floyd. And, as Hodge also mentioned too, the guys who came over with him from North Texas were the ones who looked the most comfortable, which makes sense, I
Yeah.
think, especially on the offensive side of the floor. I wouldn't, let's not raise the alarm bells just yet on other members of the team who might not have scored much. I saw a lot of complaints about Eagle staff
I was
and
going to say, that's my surprise. 1 point. I think I would have bet the house
yeah,
that he wasn't going to score just 1 point, that there would have
yes,
been more
yeah,
than 1 point from him. But hey, it is
yeah.
only one game.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't seem like they're using him as a primary ball handler. Mainly, that role seemed to be mainly reserved for Jasper Floyd or Amir Jenkins, whoever was on the court. Sometimes Honor Huff, it appeared to be. But coming into this game, I mean, I know everybody had high expectations for Eagle staff, Honor Huff, and I think that they'll both have their time on the offensive end.
Mhm.
I think Ross Hodge articulates his reasoning for these kind of things very well, particularly when it came to the rebounding numbers, why they were so offset, and also talking about having shooters who come into his system who aren't really used to being worked as much as or has have such a high effort of demand as he does in his system. So
Yeah.
I think it does make sense that they're still kind of getting their legs underneath them, and maybe the shooting will take some time. But I mean, Eagle staff only had 3 field goal attempts too, so it's not like he shot a heavy volume and didn't make anything. I kind of said it in my post game recap too that you don't score 51 points in a college game while not being able to score the ball. Like that's just, he
Right.
is
It's
he
not
is
an
such a raw
accident. Yeah.
scorer. He's going to
Yeah.
have his nights. You're probably going to see nights where Jasper Floyd might score very few points or Honor Huff and other guys will make up for it. This team still isn't at full strength yet, which is I think it could be a detriment to them, not
True.
just in the terms of not having everybody, but not being able to get everybody out there at the same time, and maybe having to mix some lineups even more than what they had to tonight and in last night and in the exhibition game.
Yeah, they won 70-54, so a comfortable victory, even though it wasn't really comfortable throughout the game. And as I said, Mount St. Mary's is a team, and Ross Hodge brought this up too, that is going to vie for the NCAA tournament this year and vie for their conference title. Not a Big 12 team, though, not a power team, not a team that you want to have to be nervous about losing too early on, especially in game one. But game one is the game that you're shaking rust off. And even if you are full strength, and they are not, they lost a player even a couple days before the season and are going to have him out for a while in Chance Moore, who many think they're going to be relying on, certainly off the bench, to get some critical minutes throughout the season. One game one can go like this, and we've seen game one go like this for other programs across the country. We've already seen game one be a loss for some teams that had great years that are expecting a lot more this season. But again, Mount St. Mary's, you got to get a victory. And the most surprising thing again is Eagle staff scoring only 1 point. Even when shooters have off nights, you do figure that it would be more than one literal point that he'd hit a field goal. It's 1 point off a free throw, 0 for 3 from the field. And he is that long range shooter that many of us, we talked about on the season preview show, are expecting to be the team leader in scoring. And he's well behind the 8 ball right now. It does not mean that he can't have a 40-point game because, as Hodge talked about throughout the offseason, it's not like, even though he was not at a power school when he scored all those points last year, he was able to score against power competition and quality competition as well. So it's not like it was just isolated in the league he was playing in. And when you're a scorer, you're a scorer. He could turn around in game two, as we are recording this in front of game two, and score 45 points. I'm not predicting that, but score more realistically 20 points. He could have a 20-point game. Certainly could happen. But the positive is, and as we talked about as well in the preview show, that unlike last year with Javon Small, if he had 1 point, they would have lost by 30, especially when DeVries was out. This team has depth in scoring that if Eagle staff has literally 1 point, as he did in the season debut, they can still win comfortably because somebody else gets over 20 points. And then they have multiple players in double digits in scoring, even with Eagle staff really not showing up offensively at all. So they're able to overcome that. And defensively, they still showed what they can do and showed their potential and showed maybe why they can win in the Big 12. They have a strong defense, and everybody bought in defensively. Even Eagle staff, if you're not scoring, you're buying in defensively, which is a positive too. Because sometimes you see scores that if they're not scoring, they kind of just mope around and they don't know what to do. But in the Hodge system, you're still required to play defense no matter what level you can provide. And that is a positive as well. But of course, the negatives, as you also brought up in your takeaways column, separate from Eagle staff scoring only one, because I'm going to bet the house again that he'll score more than one in the next game. So I would have lost the house, and maybe I'm going to get the house back on that bet. Rebounding, this is a bigger team than in recent years. WVU has not had a legit rebounder who can just get double doubles and dominate the boards really since Culver. So back to Huggins. It looked like in game one that rebounding is still an issue, maybe more so than many people thought, just on this team being bigger than DeVries' group last year. I know Hodge thinks that rebounding is just going to get fixed. Where are you on the concern of rebounding? Because they're going to hit free throws. Eagle staff's going to score more than 1 point. But rebounding is something that no WVU coach, including Huggins towards the end, has really been able to fix. There's size there, but rebounding still appears to be a problem despite having a little bit more size.
Yeah. I think that I'll be interested to see what happens on a night where guys like Harlan Obioha and DJ Moore aren't in foul trouble.
Right.
That takes away some rebounding depth there. And, Obioha only played 17 minutes in the game. That's going to hurt you from a board standpoint. He did get into
Sure.
some foul trouble. DJ Moore actually ended up with more minutes than he did and got an offensive rebound. So you can live with that, I think. But I think I mentioned this in the column today too, which is that I think seven of St. Mary's rebounds came off of WVU free throw attempts. And that's you're gonna lose those rebounds 9 times out of 10. And coming from the offensive side. So I think those are some ones that if you take those off the board, it is a little bit more level. And talking about too with turnovers, I think you see that a lot on the women's side of things too, is on the turnover category, because the WV women's team turns people over so much
Yeah.
that the other team doesn't even have time to get a shot off. So
Sure,
I think
Mark Hellett
what
brings that up a lot.
yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, they did force 20 turnovers. So that's at least, well, I mean, you could just say that's maybe 20 shots knocked off the board for them, but it though you're way more likely to get a defensive rebound than an offensive rebound. So I really see where
Yeah.
Hodge is coming from there. I do think that there is a level to it where you're not going to get by with it in Big 12 play. So that will need to be a set of numbers that really does even itself out. Right now, at this point in the season, I think you can live with that. You can take that with you. It was a tight game last night. There were a lot of fouls called last night. So a
Yeah.
lot of free throw opportunities for WVU and St. Mary's alike. But I don't know. I do think that there will be opportunities for the rebounding to get better because if you combine Harlan Obioha being out there on the court with Brennan Lorient, I mean Lorient had 13 last night on the boards, so he had a good night. Obioha coming in and let's see how many did he finish with? I want to say it was just two. So I think you have that. Jackson Fields is also hurt. He's gonna be able to bring in a larger presence when he is fully healthy and available. Chance
Yeah.
Moore was a great rebounder last year at St. Bonaventure. I think I want to say 6.5. So I think that a good bit of their rebounding production is still unavailable right now. So looking at that, I think that the rebounding. I imagine it gets better than it does yesterday, but there are still some things from a discipline standpoint that will need cleaned up before Big 12 play.
And you hope it doesn't get worse because if it gets
Right.
worse, then they could lose a game like this. And the funny thing
Yes.
is, if you didn't watch the game and you just look at the box score for these two teams overall, not even individual player wise, but overall, you maybe would think Mount St. Mary's won this game. If not, it's certainly being closer than the final score says it was. WVU won field goal percentage 43.8 to 39.1. So that's kind of close. 3-point edge actually went to Mount St. Mary's 29 to 27, give or take some decimals there. Free throw percentage, the same type of deal where Mount St. Mary's barely won that, but they did win it 68.4 to 65.7. Total rebounds, Mount St. Mary's, a mid-major, won total rebounding. And to the point of West Virginia gets turnovers, and then that takes away chances at rebounds, and maybe you're going to get more defensive boards. That's valid and probably going to be the case, and definitely has been the case for the women's team the last couple of years. But ironically enough, so Mount St. Mary's won the defensive rebounding battle 29 to 20. That is really why they won the rebounding battle. So that really wasn't evident as much based on what the numbers show in this game. And then, of course, West Virginia did only turn it over 9 times. Mount St. Mary turned it over 18 points in the paint. The West Virginia won 30 to 26. So West Virginia was able to use their talent edge, their size edge, the ability to take care of the basketball, their smarts, and the fact they are power conference players now and a more talented team you would imagine being in the Big 12 to eventually pull away and get the win. They were the better team. They were at home. But Mount St. Mary's really put an effort in. They really hustled in this game. They really showed how good they really are. They kind of exposed some problems in the Mountaineers. And moving forward, again, you figure Eagle staff, if he scores from 1 to even 8, this is a way bigger blowout for West Virginia. I mean, so that's an issue there. But defensive rebounding, to lose that by 9, to lose the overall rebounding by 8, and then to be outshot percentage-wise in three-pointers, free throws, and have it be close, and even field goal percentage in general, that's a recipe for disaster no matter who you play. And if they do that again, they certainly could lose even before they get into power conference competition and even before they get into Big 12 play. You would imagine they coast until the brawl, but if they do this in the brawl, the excuse of, well, Moore's not there and they're not 100%, that's not going to really work with the fan base, as we know. They're going to have to figure it out. And now they're going to start facing teams that are similar to them in size. That was a major problem in last year's brawl. They couldn't they couldn't handle rebounding at all, and they just got destroyed once Pitt started scoring. If a team gets hot and a team can do even more than this rebounding wise if they either can't hang or get lazy or whatever because they don't have all their guys out there and Eagle staff is cold. If they get really cold, it could be a recipe for disaster again. Luke Blain, Mike Asti here, Mountaineer Report. West Virginia Sports Now. Luke's coverage of West Virginia's first game of the 2025-26 season, the debut season of Ross Hodge. His first game, his first win in the regular season is all available on the site, including his takeaways column. Now, would you say, because some were saying this after the game, so would you say that it's fair to say that West Virginia got lucky to get the victory over Mount St. Mary's? Or does that take away credit for the win for you? Again, a lot of the box score says that Mount St. Mary's was better in a lot of the categories. The Mountaineers did get a victory by 16 points, which you cannot poo-poo by any means. They were not 100%. Eagle staff basically didn't score, and they still won by almost 20 points. They had to pull away at the end, but they won by almost 20 points at the end of the day. But a lot of those categories do show that Mount St. Mary's was equal with them, if not better with them, in a lot. Did they get lucky, or is that not fair?
I wouldn't I wouldn't call it luck, mainly because they still played the game the way that they wanted to, which is a heavy defense emphasis. It wasn't like, thinking back, it wasn't like the Cardinals Titans game, right, where they dropped the ball out of the before the end zone and
Right.
the ball fumble. Listen, I'm not trying to shoehorn my Titans in there, but that's the
I
only
just
way I
gonna
know how to
say,
describe it.
it's
Like
fitting, but
that was one of the most ridiculous things I've still ever
yeah,
seen. I don't think
yeah,
anything will ever top it. But I think
yeah,
they forced the issue on defense. They turned that into offense. They had 25 points off turnovers, yeah, 19 fast break points. So that still worked. I think the thing is they need to be better at offense in the half court. There were some bad shots there. There were some bad, some bad overall efforts on the offensive side of the floor. And that's something that you're just going to have to figure out by Big 12 play too. You're not going to be able to beat every team by getting out on fast breaks and trying to force a turnover. So, and that's where turnovers comes in too, right? Which
yeah.
is where, talking about the rebounding numbers, everything like that. It's all, I think that's all interconnected, and there's so many layers to this kind of a game. You could say, like, hey, if Mount St. Mary's made more shots, but 18 for 46 is pretty bad still. So I mean, even if they play an average game, I think you could say that there's an argument for uh, a better sense of uh, what am I trying to say? A competitive game.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think that WVU still went out there and made plays. They made the right adjustments. Jasper Floyd had a really good night, as everybody's kind of hammered that nail home. But I think that there's just, you're just gonna have nights where you make shots and you don't. And if Honor Huff made all 11 of his threes, we'd be singing a wildly different tune. We would be saying that Honor Huff is going to outshoot everybody in the Big 12 every game, and he's never going to miss a three-pointer. It's all about, trends. I think a lot of these statistics are going to level out. I think that we are going to see things start to kind of plateau, and they're going to try to find that wavelength that works best for them. But, coming to it, I wouldn't call it luck, no.
I think I'm with you. When you win the way they won and you pull away at the end, it's a legit victory, especially when, again, you don't get much scoring from your top guy and you are undermanned. No one's going to feel bad, though, when you're facing a mid-major and you're undermanned, because they're just undermanned based on talent, you would imagine. And they were on the road, so Mount St. Mary's is certainly not going to feel any type of way for West Virginia claiming to be undermanned, or WVU fans bringing up Chance Moore not being there. But Eagle staff scoring one is not something you're going to figure to occur. And the Mountaineers did dominate the turnover battle and did flip the script repeatedly. Also had points in the paint, and you also got to like that if they're cold shooting wise, or they have a player like Eagle staff who is ice cold shooting wise. There's this thinking sometimes in basketball, and it's almost the Steph Curry effect in the way the NBA is today, that if you're not hitting long range shots, especially, and if you're taking too many mid range shots and you're not even hitting enough of those, that your offense just sucks, or that you're just sucking. And it's not like it's clicking, but if the points are on the board, the points are on the board. I mean, for a pro reference here, look at Giannis.
Yeah.
Giannis is not, dominating in terms of shooting percentage. He's not living at the 3-point line. Even Jokic. I mean, he has 2 MVPs, and a lot of it is you just realize I'm bigger than you, and I'm going to go through the lane and go through the paint, and I'm going to dominate the boards, and I'm going to get second chance points, and I'm just going to body you up, and then I'm going to turn around and hit a shot. But if that's cold, I'm still going to be able to dominate. And that's what Nikola Jokic is doing. That's what Giannis is doing. And I'm not saying West Virginia has one of those 2 guys, but they found a way to get points on the board and score. And if you got to live in the paint and your outside shooting is not working, it's not working behind the arc or even in the mid-range, a jumper's not working, then fine. The points still count. So they figured out a way to get it done offensively. They did a lot more in the paint than I necessarily would have predicted them to do. You can't have them be this cold this often, but again, they showed their depth in scoring. They showed the defensive ability, which is going to be how this team could actually contend for a future championship, is by being this great defensively. That was certainly an issue in the past, or if it wasn't an issue in the past, like last year's team did have a solid defensive year, but then had no offense or just relied on small. This team, again, has depth in scoring, and you got to imagine the Eagle staff's not just going to finish with 1 point every single day. I guess, criticism beyond just having a cold night, and I imagine Ross Hodge telling him in the gym, and what I want to see moving forward from this team, and it's not even just Eagle staff, it's really everybody outside of maybe Jasper Floyd, is to just shoot more often. And it may sound contradictory to what I said at the beginning of this, that if you're not shooting, go ahead and do it in the paint because you're the bigger team. That can work, and that's fine, and that's points on the board, and you just want to have the points on the board. Again, Giannis gets points on the board does not necessarily mean he's going to drill 3-pointers like Steph Curry. But if you're a shooter and your bread and butter is shooting, and you're there because you are an efficient shooter, especially from the long range, yeah, you might have a cold night, but it's going to be ice cold, and you're going to have no chance of success when you're 0 for 3. I'd almost rather, and this might sound weird for some to say, I'd almost rather Eagle staff to be 0 for 6 than 0 for 3. Shoot the rock. Like, he is there to shoot. It's almost like, and it appeared that he realized he was cold. Maybe it's their defense. Maybe it's him just being cold. And then he just said, I got to do other things. I'm just not going to really shoot. Other people got me for this game. No, you're there to shoot. If you get a chance and you get open, you got to take that shot. And he's even been able to hit shots throughout his career that are contested. Take those too, especially when you're in a game like this where you're going to win and you're ahead enough. Towards the end, take more shots if you're still on the floor. I just would like him to take more shots in general. Forget the percentage if that's the concern. 0 for 6 and 0 for 3, the percentage is 0. Like, just take more shots in general and then see what happens. 3 shots from your top shooter doesn't work. I imagine, again, that turns around, and I imagine Ross Hodge telling him, hey, shoot the ball. There's going to be cold nights, but just freaking shoot the ball. And yeah, Lee, as you're saying here in the chat, they do need time to gel. The Pitt game's not game 1, it's game 4. Obviously, that's a big deal. And then after that, there's going to be more time to gel. They do have more Power 4 non-conference opponents this year that could be losses if they don't gel quickly. And maybe the record I've always said, it could be worse in out-of-conference play this year than in past years, but it doesn't mean they're a worse team. And if they do better in the Big 12, they'll still be fine. Maybe they'll be more battle-tested. We will really figure out what works there, and by the time maybe they play some of those games, Ohio State, etc., Clemson, Georgia, Xavier, whoever they face in that tournament, maybe they'll be more battle-tested, and at that point, they will have gelled. But the Pitt game is fast approaching, though, and that's one game that I don't think anyone wants to hear them say, we haven't gelled yet, even though it is still early in this tenure and early in this season. Luke Blain, Mike Asti here, Mountaineer Report here, West Virginia Sports Now. Again, all of Luke's coverage of this Mountaineer basketball season, year 1 of Ross Hodge, is over there at West Virginia Sports Now. I do want to flip the script here for this show, and we're going to talk a lot more basketball moving forward, but football, we put a pin in it, kind of got irrelevant. It's now a little relevant again. They had a big win to say the least on the road at Houston, a ranked victory. So Rich Rodriguez only has 3 wins on the board right now. One of them is an FCS. One of them's Pitt when they had a much worse team than they're putting forth right now with a different QB. They'd love to play that again, I'm sure. And then the other one's a ranked freaking victory. So West Virginia has
in a way,
3
a ranked victory.
Yeah, they have 3. Rich Rod has 3 wins right now in Rich Rod 2.0 as we're speaking. 2 of them are to bowl teams. One of them is a ranked win. And if you go by the CFP, they're 2 ranked. They're actually now they're 2 ranked wins. Pitt wasn't ranked at the time of the game, but now they're ranked, and it's a different Pitt team. But it's just bizarre because the other one's an FCS win. So 2 quality wins, 1 not, I guess, simply put. But now they're interesting because if they win out, they are a bowl team. A bowl in year 1, we all said was going to be successful, and I had 6-6. It would be a weird, funky way to go 6-6, where they were so bad for so long, and then all of a sudden going to win streak. But maybe it could happen with Arizona State's injuries, Colorado being bad, and Texas Tech. Maybe they will have cleaned. I said in the postgame show, maybe Texas Tech will already have a Big 12 title appearance on lock. Maybe they know their fate. Maybe they'll rest some guys. Maybe not. That'll kind of be the hope, I guess. But it is at home this year. But even going into that game with a chance at a bowl and to kind of spoil things for the Red Raiders would be something to play for and makes this team interesting again. So, Luke, do you think the Houston win? We saw the offense click. We saw kind of the peak of the offense. We saw Scotty Fox look like Pat White out there. We saw run, pass, 200 and some yards on the ground, 240 some, dominate the Rich Rod style. That was the game that Rich Rod can really hang his hat on and say, that's potential for my offense. That's what I did in the past. That's what I can do again in the future if everything goes right. Tight ends were involved. The defense made plays. They forced turnovers. They scored off the turnovers. We sat there in Athens, they would force turnovers and they couldn't get anything off of them because the offense could do nothing. And most of the year, the offense struggled to help the defense. In this game, the offense not only scored off the turnovers, the defense got a damn turnover that ended up being a touchdown to pick 6. And they were able to get a break when the offense was actually on the field. Even if they didn't score, they methodically moved the ball. They had 6, 7, 8-minute long drives. They kept the ball and created first downs, 3rd and shorts. Everything they've been talking about that they want to do, they did in that game. And as I said in my coverage, that game, despite them having 3 wins and the brawl being an emotional one, only once all year have they put it all together, complete game style, offense, defense, special teams, exactly what the Rich Rod, mentality is of hard edge. Only once, not even in the brawl. And it's at Houston. They put it all together finally. So, is that just an aberration, or do you think that's a sign of things to come to end this year strong? How interesting is this team really now that they have a legit quality win on the board? The first ranked win for West Virginia football since 2018 when Dana Holgerson was still the coach. Brown didn't get any ranked wins on the road. He got some at home way early, but not any on the road. The first ranked win on the road in 2018 goes to Rich Rod. In a year that prior to that game, myself, many others were saying it's one of the worst seasons in program history, certainly of the modern era. And I was getting ready to start writing the article that it's the very worst, worse than 2001 or worse than 1978. It's at least not worse than those 2 seasons now. They have a quality win, and they at least matched what he did 20 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be a sign of things to come. I mean, listen, I've been the pessimist when it comes to this football
Yeah?
team since before the season. I the reason I'm leaning that way is because you're about to host Colorado. And
Yeah.
Colorado's about to start their freshman quarterback, which is never a good sign
No.
if you're a Power 4 team, like or just a football team
Well,
in general.
Coach Prime said it's common sense if you didn't hear him. They asked him why he's starting the freshman, and he literally said it's common sense. That was
Well,
his answer.
I mean, if nothing's going well, then
Yeah,
and that's the thing. If nothing's going well, then you might as well. I think those 2 points kind of go hand in hand.
He
Where
didn't
it's like,
elaborate,
well,
so maybe that's true. Maybe it's just common
sure.
sense. They have nothing else
Is
to
it
do.
like that was the extent of the answer?
Yeah, no, yes.
I did watch that press conference.
Yeah, he said it was common sense. He also is no longer covering him would be hilarious. He's no longer making players available. because he feels like the media would go at, basically, to paraphrase, the media would go after them. It's a toxic media environment is what he's saying now. So when he wants to protect them, which they're getting paid, and it's completely ludicrous to not make them available. But and I get the protection argument. No, his presser was pretty lit for about 9 minutes from what I saw. It wasn't too long, and it was very adversarial with the media, very adversarial the whole time as it's been. But yes, common sense to start the freshman, according to Deion Sanders. Coach Prime,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, go ahead. Why not? I think that like in a season that's gone as badly as it has for Colorado, you might as well try to find something. I'll use the Rich Rudd term and say try to find a spark and
Right.
do something, except they actually need it this time.
Yeah.
So I think that, if you're Colorado, you've had 52 points or 50 points hung up on you in the past 2 games.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, go ahead. Because the offense, I mean, is going to have to try to keep up at least to a little bit of a degree. But, but on that note, I think that WVU really has a chance. Kid's going to be coming into a road environment. And I'd like to think that Mountaineer fans are still going to show up and show out for this one the same way they did 2 weeks ago for the TCU game. And coming into this one, especially after a great win, like that was a really good win. That, like, I think that,
Yeah.
you got to give WVU their flowers for that one. I want to make sure I did. We're just say that was a very, very good win for this team. So if you come in, try to keep the ball rolling for Colorado, and say you do win that one, your next two are Arizona State and Texas Tech. And like now we're at the point where the schedule is kind of getting more difficult as
Yeah.
it goes on, because the Big 12 has been very strong up until this point in the season, and then you get that Houston win, or Colorado. Well, Colorado's probably a little bit of a step down from Houston, but from Colorado on, well, yeah, Colorado lost to Houston by 16, but so
Yeah.
so from Colorado on, you're going to see more challenges. You have a chance this week to get consecutive wins for the first time all year, and
Yeah.
I'm sure that they can try to look to carry that momentum over. I mean, it looked like a
They
team
have
that
a
clicked.
bye before the Texas Tech game, at least. It
That is true.
appeared that was a horrible bye when we were talking at the beginning of the season. But if they end up with 5 wins and a chance for that to be a bowl appearance, then it's actually a pretty good bye, because then they would have 2 weeks to prepare for the best team in the conference. And upsets do happen. I mean, it happened to Rich Rod back in the day. Like,
Yep.
they could spoil the season for the Red Raiders. We've seen crazier things. And Texas Tech, you talk about a program that normally chokes things away. Texas Tech has done that forever. It would not shock me if they would blow it at the end. And the Big 12 is getting log jammed at the top, that they probably can't afford to rest anybody or think anything's locked up or anything like that in that game. It is in Morgantown. Last year's game was on the road. West Virginia never wins on the road, but historically usually does win against Texas Tech at home. Again, I don't necessarily think they're going to win that game, but what I think the Houston win did, not Oklahoma, the Houston win did, the red. It was kind of similar to what happened a few years ago when they beat Oklahoma. It almost feels like a similar vibe. But the Houston win, yeah, what that win did, you mentioned fans and who's going to show up and even being proud of the team and what they showed. I think it absolutely is going to keep the fan interest there. I mean, unless they would lose to Colorado, I think it's going to keep the fan interest there. Certainly going into the Colorado game, the fans are not only going to show up because they're honoring the 2005 Sugar Bowl champs, they're honoring Steve Slayton, who's going to be in attendance. And by the way, if they beat Colorado, then they need to fly Steve Slayton all over the country for every week, because he will then he will be the 2-0 himself. He was at the Houston game because he lives there, and then he'll be in Morgantown for to be honored for against Colorado. If they win both of those 2 games, Steve Slayton they need to take him everywhere around the country if he's available, and he's not, but still. But he's a good luck charm so far. So the fans are going to be there to support Steve and to support the 2005 Sugar Bowl team, I'd imagine. However, you're coming off a really big win. Fans are now talking more. They're getting more excitement. Engagement's up a little bit. Like, you're seeing a little bit of, okay, maybe they won a bowl game that they otherwise wouldn't care about. They might like playing the role of spoiler when they thought let's just worry about basketball and the season was over. And again, Arizona State is very banged up, and they've been hot and cold all year. They're better. They should win. It's on the road, but this has not been the same Arizona State team like last year. They're not dominating at all. This is not a dominant team. They're better, but they're not dominant. They could get upset. So if you beat Colorado, it's really, really interesting. Now the issue is if you lose to Colorado, you do ruin the vibes of the Houston win. It's a big win, but you ruin those vibes. It's still the hot and cold roller coaster ride. You got to show that you're consistent. And also, I think the fact that the offense finally clicked, we've seen the defense play well and them not win before, but we've never really seen the offense do what it did at Houston all year. What Rich Rod's been talking about, and even fans who are pro Rich Rod been saying that this is what the offense can be like, what it was 20 years ago. We hadn't seen it until at Houston. At Houston, we saw it. If they can do that again, then I think you're getting into the offseason where you're having an argument of, then we're going to get into the debate. Do you spend money on bringing in a veteran quarterback to compete with Scotty Fox, or do you say he's our guy, and if we have randomly thrown out a number, if we have $6-7 million to play with, then instead of $1 million going into or 500,000, whatever, bringing in a better quarterback, nope, we're going to use all this money to bring in a better receiver, more receiver depth, linemen, tight ends, all put everything around Scotty Fox and use the money there and maybe give him a little bit more and then not worry about quarterback, which is the highest price position in the transfer market. That's an argument. That's going to be a debate. I think Rich will still bring a veteran QB in, but that'll be the debate. Now, if they go ahead and lose to Colorado and Scotty Fox throws 4 picks and the offense sucks and purters again, then all that's off the board and the vibes are gone. But it kind of saved the vibes and saved the season a little bit to at least make this something to care about these final weeks. Whereas if they got blown out to the Cougars, I think Mountain fans would have been checked out outside of maybe celebrating Steve Slayton.
Yeah. Well, I think also bowl eligibility definitely plays a factor in that too, right? I think it's specifically if you're thinking of it from a fan standpoint, if they lost that Houston game, then really they're not playing for anything other than pride the rest of the year.
Yeah.
And how many fans are going to tune in for that, especially with basketball happening at the exact same time? So I think that that's a very big aspect to this. And, this team definitely still has things to play for. There is a path in front of them for bowl eligibility. And I mean, it's a very straight and narrow path. You just have to go out there and win the games, right? So there it is.
Yeah.
I'll be waiting my coaching contract in the mail. But I think that when it comes to, putting it together, like I said, they have that steady increase of difficulty with these next coming games. And I think, they looked like a complete team. That's
the thing.
what they
It was a
looked. That's what they looked like.
complete win. It wasn't just a ranked
Yeah.
win. It was a complete win. Yeah.
Yeah, because you had, Pitt and Ohio. Well, Pitt, you go out there, the defense looked all right for the most part until the offense couldn't stay on the field.
Yeah.
And then the offense, when it started clicking going into the fourth quarter and overtime, that's when the team looked more complete. Ohio, like you said, the offense couldn't do anything. They were getting those turnovers and couldn't cash in anything off of them. They got turnovers and they scored. They brought a pick 6 back. Like that is big time. Those are big, big steps for, and I mean, it's not like it's just your classic run of the mill Houston team. That's a Houston team that had a good enough season that they were ranked. So there are green flags when it comes to this win that you can probably lean on that a little bit more and feel a little bit more confident that, hey, maybe there is something here that not a full 180 on the season by any means, but you can actually see some improvement and get hopes up that WVU will play at least a potent, WVU will play a bowl game this year.
Yeah, I think most logical fans realized that this year was very unlikely to be a Big 12 championship year. While it's a fact that Rich Rod was talking about that in the offseason, which I always hold him accountable for doing because he was talking of a big game in the offseason that, we're going to go ahead and contend right away. I never really thought that was going to be the case. And while it's a fact that certain coaches, certain programs, obviously getting a big influx of money is part of that, strength of schedule is part of that. Kurt Signetti at Indiana is kind of the peak of that you can win right away to start a tenure in this era because of the portal. It can happen. It's easier than maybe 20 years ago. That's all true. That's all what Rich Rod was bringing up as well in the offseason. Arizona State did go from worst to first. That's all true. We've seen all of that. But in all reality, West Virginia didn't get the $11 million influx that Indiana got to help Signetti. So without that, it was going to be a bit of a rebuilding process here, and it was very unlikely to be that big cash-in year in year one. Because of all of that, I don't think anybody would have gone into the year mad if they finished 6-6, 7-5, any of those records, really even 5-7, if they showed some promise for the future, and getting in a bowl game would make year one a success for Rich Rodriguez in general. The weirdest part about this is the fact that they're in line for it till the end of the year is they went through a stretch this season with 3-4 weeks in a row where they were getting boat raced by 20 plus, 30 plus points, including where we talked about, and it appears it was rock bottom. And I was there in Orlando when they got absolutely blasted by UCF in the second half after it was 14-7 at halftime on the road. They showed an offensive spark at halftime, and then they completely cratered out and collapsed defensively, offensively, everything else under the sun. And that's a program that spent similar money that was also dealing with a roster overhaul and a first-year head coach. And that was why everyone was so angered by that loss more than the others. Okay, it's going to be a rebuilding year, but if we're going to agree on a certain report of money that the program wanted to kind of use as an excuse, that report says UCF did nothing more than you financially, and they just destroyed you. Why? And we didn't ever really get an answer outside of Rich basically just saying it was a horrendous second half. We know. I watched it. Of course it was. But they turned around and showed something, having some heart, having some pride. They clearly are showing that they have in no way. Now, Richard was never going to get fired after year one, even if they went 0-12. But this team clearly wants to play for him still. Like, clearly they're not giving up on Rich Rodriguez and this staff. If they were, they would not have beat Houston, and they wouldn't have played like that. These players clearly care. They're clearly still bought in. Certainly the players that are young, Scotty Fox clearly bought in and clearly learning and clearly progressing. And maybe he is the guy, and maybe he got it because Khalil Wilkins got hurt or whatever the case may be. Because I think Khalil Wilkins should have started at UCF after the spark he showed at BYU, but Rich Rod disagreed. But Scotty Fox has taken the reins now, and everyone's buying it around him. All the players are saying how they believe in him more than even a few weeks ago, basically, and they've seen his maturity and progression. So with all of that happening, that's a sign of things going in the right direction. That if you're a fan, you have to like, okay, this team is finally playing better as the season progresses. We're seeing progression from this team. There maybe could be a quarterback of the future here. This team did not give up on the coaching staff. They did bottom out, but then they had a big major win. All of that's positive, and they're still in line for a bowl at the end of the season. All of that was going to be positive entering the year. It'll be weird if they end up 5-7 or 6-6, and they have these big wins at the end when they had a season that was arguing for the worst in the modern era just a few weeks ago. But how you get there, I guess, doesn't matter as long as you freaking get there. I mean, when you think about it. So it almost showed just something that they're still doing this at the end. And Rich Rod's teams usually do get better, which was the confusing part again about UCF. So maybe that is still very, very true. We'll see how this finishes. Again, you have to add the caveat in that we're speaking before the Colorado game, and that is a very bad Colorado team. That if they lose that game, really lose it, I don't care what the score is, whether they get blown out or not. If they lose it at home on a celebratory day after the big win, that's very, very bad. And it shows you they're inconsistent. Maybe they figured nothing out, and it certainly puts the concern back for the future. But if you end the season on a high note, Richard's still going to be there. He is recruiting well. They are still getting commits. He says the money situation from the last offseason has been rectified. We'll see if that actually is true. And we'll see how the offseason goes. But now they know there's the one portal window. They've been there a full year, etc. It should be an easier offseason coming up. So it puts more pressure on year two. He certainly can't have another, bad year. He can't have a 4-5 game losing streak in which they barely do anything. They can't have that happen again. They probably got to get at least 7-8 wins next year for this to be where the program wants to be and be going in that right direction. But there's at least a reason to maybe buy into it now because of what they showed at Houston, whereas weeks ago there was no reason to buy into it at all. And the body language here from Jerry that you can look in Scotty Fox's eyes and see he's the QB. Again, it looked like that at Houston, but we didn't see it earlier in the season. I didn't even see it at UCF. Certainly didn't see it in the brawl. He's getting better. We need to see more of it. It's one game. So they showed a lot in one game to believe in for the future, but it's still only one freaking game. If they blow up at Colorado or against Colorado, at Arizona State, and against Texas Tech, then doesn't really matter that much. The record doesn't matter now. I get it, but you want to see them play well. And I still do believe they're going to bring in competition for Scotty Fox. I don't think he's going to get handed anything, but he right now looks like he can fit it. I mean, what he looks like, Luke, the issue with Nika Markiel is maybe a better quarterback, but he couldn't fit into the Rich Rod offense, whether he's healthy or not. Scotty Fox looked like he fits into the offense, even if he's not an elite QB. So you want to have the guy that fits into the offense. That's what he looks like right now. We'll see how they finish. And the advantage for them is Colorado's a mess. They're more of a mess. And they can't. If West Virginia can get 20-some points, Colorado cannot score. They can. I mean, I'd imagine. And if it happens with a freshman quarterback, then shame on West Virginia and that defense in Zach Alley. So Colorado's been struggling to put points on the board. This is not a game they have to score 30 to beat Colorado, probably, even though you want to see that offense show that. And the Houston team they face, this is not Dana Holgerson's Houston team. That Houston team, when they were winning, was winning thanks to their defense. That's a good defense that they played really well against. Their offense actually has been kind of their issue, and we saw that as well with mistakes against the Mountaineers. I do want to segue over here, Mountaineer Report, Luke Blain, Mike Asti here, available everywhere you get your podcasts and our complete coverage of football, basketball, whatever else at West Virginia Sports Now. That this West Virginia team has this Colorado game, has these games coming up. So to round things out here, what do you need to see from this team to have now this be a successful season? Is that possible? Can they kind of save it to where it's still a successful year, even though it was so bad for so long, outside of just winning out and making a bowl game, assuming they lose a game? What can happen here the rest of the way? You actually maybe are on the money because I think you had 5-7. If they end up 5-7, it's probably reality of what this will end up being. But to kind of close it out, what do you want to see beyond just winning from this team on the field? Can this be successful still if they would somehow do something at the end, even though you're not going to forget how freaking bad it was for so long?
Yeah, I think that when it comes to, I think there just need to be signs of a well-coached team, which I think there are. I think that there needs to be, I like the idea of 2 wins for this to be a success here, mainly because I think that, now with it clicking, you don't want to look back at the Houston game and think, "Oh, well, that was a fluke that they played that well," which, that does happen. There are sometimes
Yeah.
teams go out there and they'll score a bunch of points and they'll play good defense and they'll win games. And then well, I mean, look, like Northern Illinois, whenever they beat Notre Dame, everybody was like all eyes on Northern Illinois, and they went out right back the next week and was like, "How in the world did they beat Notre Dame?" So
Yeah.
it's like that just
Saw it in the year
those
that Marshall beat Notre Dame. I mean,
yeah,
the year Marshall
exactly.
beat Notre Dame, they kind of did the same type of thing. Marshall program was never to that level again, except for last year, I
Yep.
guess you could argue. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you need to have some, like, you need offensive cohesiveness. I think you need the defense to keep doing what it's doing. I think the breaking point for me when it comes to this past game was how good the offense was. They had
Yeah.
sustained drives. They got the opening kickoff and they went and took up 4.5 minutes off the clock and they went and scored. That is big time to be able to set those things up.
Yeah.
So when it comes to those kinds of things, you need to, because I mean, the defense has been fine all year. Even in the games where they've given up those big scoring totals, it's because they're on the field for long periods of time because the offense gets a quick 3 and out,
Yeah.
and then they just get winded, and the other offense is ready to just go straight into the end zone. That's not what we saw against Houston. We saw the defense be able to regroup, come out each drive and look fresh, and keep up with the other team's receivers and things of that nature. So I think we came into the we knew that Rich Rod was an offensive guy. We knew that he was the offensive type of head coach, that defense wasn't his specialty. He had the defense playing well. So on top of seeing improvement from the team offense, like when it comes to coaching and on the offensive side, I think that'll be a good thing, and that will personally get me a little bit more bought into the new Rich Rod tenure than I was before, in that if the players buy in, if Rich Rod is bought in, which we know he is, then things can happen for
Yeah.
the offense that will make them competitive. And that's just
Yeah.
what I need to see throughout the rest of the schedule. I think good offense and just being competitive in these games.
Yeah, being competitive in the games is the ticket because they've not been competitive way too often this year. And maybe if you end this 5-7, even if you miss a bowl and you maybe, or maybe you play a spoiler and you beat Texas Tech, or just even if you lose these games, but you're because they're better teams. After you beat Colorado, if you lose the next two, but you're in those games, you're competitive, you're showing the same stuff you showed at Houston, but maybe you just still lose because you're undermanned. Then I think there's a chance to go back to argue if you're Rich Rodriguez, okay, yeah, it took a while to get going. We had to find our guys. We had to employ the culture. We had to get the right system in place. We had to have the guys really buy in and learn the system. It's not easy to do right away. We also had some challenges that now he claims has been rectified financially. And we had a lot of injuries to deal with. Jaheim White played a game and a half. Jaden Bray played a game and a half. A lot of other players missed a lot of time. We were never really healthy. If Jaheim White was out there, maybe we would have won more games. If they finished 5-7, they could absolutely claim, Luke, that Jaheim White playing would have get him one more win and then they'd be 6-6. So that is all on the board if they end strong, and that could lead you into having confidence for year two to maybe take that to another level if things are really rectified financially and recruiting, etc. They have put together a solid recruiting class so far, and they have more time to do so now. But if they just lay an egg and they would somehow lose to Colorado or just play awful and lose by 20, 30 points to even good teams at the end of the season in Arizona State and Texas Tech, and then they just give you that sour taste in your mouth that, okay, Houston's a fluke, and it's one of the worst seasons of all time in program history, and who knows about year two, then it doesn't matter who was hurt or what's going on or what challenges existed. You just didn't get it done, and there's no excuses that anyone wants to hear. So it's a big difference on how they finish. And if you didn't have the Houston win, I think everyone would just be on that train no matter what. But because the Houston game is on the board, it does provide you a chance to, say, okay, there's something to care about here. And maybe Mountaineer fans need to also root in a weird way for Pitt because there's now the weird part that could exist for this rivalry that you never can duplicate 13-9 in this era. They're not even in the same conference anymore, and a conference champ would automatically get in. So that West Virginia team back then would have got in regardless. But if Pitt ends up winning out or winning 2 out of 3 and they don't win the ACC and they miss the playoff, they miss the playoff because they have the worst loss of anybody out of these teams they're competing with, and that's a loss to West Virginia on September 13th. And that game is still going to be a problem for Pitt to overcome, even with a different cast of characters, if they don't win their conference. So West Virginia fans could then say, okay, they kind of 13-9 Pitt in a way, if that ends up being the case. It won't be exactly the same. It wasn't the end of the year. Emotionally won't feel the same, but they kind of will have ruined Pitt's year if that ends up being the case. And I'm sure Mountaineer fans would like that as well for year one. So if they can make a bowl and also kind of quasi ruin Pitt's year, then I think it's fine with all the injuries for Rich Rod and you go into year two hoping for more. But if you just suck down the stretch and Houston's an aberration, then no, it doesn't make anyone feel good, no matter what happens with Pitt in all reality. And Rich Rod's the one who said just this week that, yeah, Pitt is a big game, but the conference games are the biggest. He almost let it slip. He said the conference games are the biggest. Oh, yeah, Pitt's a big deal too. Yeah, he's true. The Big 12 games are the biggest. So you got to show what you can do in conference play moving forward as well. And Texas Tech's going to spend again next year. So these are going to be the teams they're going to be competing with next year as well. We will see what happens. It won't be easy. The schedule did beef up here at the end, and they kind of blew the games that maybe were more winnable again. It also got to annoy you, Luke, that if you beat Houston, even with all the injuries, UCF was certainly a beatable team. Like if you there was a bowl appearance here available, even with all these injuries, based on what they showed against Houston, even with this current roster, that was only a couple weeks before. They should have beat TCU, even with that being close, and they showed something there. They should have actually won the game with how bad TCU was in that game. So if that was a win, if UCF was a win, now they're in an 8-win season despite all the injuries. It could have been different, even though they endured one of the worst month and a half in program history, certainly since I can remember, and really you could argue of the modern era. That'll do it for this edition of the show. We'll see how interesting they really, really are. And there's a lot of pressure on this Colorado game They got to show out, not just like crawl through with a game-winning field goal against a really bad team. They got to not only win, but they got to show out. They got to impress. They got to do what they did against Houston, against Colorado as well. They got to show they still give a damn as they did on the road at Houston. And sometimes Neil Brown actually said this. Sometimes it's easier when you got your backs against the wall to win big and play well on the road than it is at home. I mean, they're going to be at home. One of the best teams in program history is going to be there. One of the best players in program history is going to be there. If they get nervous or start trying to do too much because of that environment, they could ruin all of this. It may sound like, oh, it doesn't matter because the year is not going anywhere anyway, and a bowl game really doesn't matter in this era. But they need to freaking beat Colorado, and then I think the rest can be gravy. Just win that game and let the rest be gravy. But Arizona State's banged up as well with their quarterback. That could be on the board. I doubt Texas Tech will win, but we will see. Playing spoiler could be something for Mountaineer fans to actually care about the rest of the year now, even though Ross Hodge's team is also playing and also winning as of now. So that'll do it for this edition of the show. Hit up Mountaineer Report everywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, TuneIn, Google Play, etc. Also all of our coverage at West Virginia Sports Now. And who would have thought that November has hit and Mountaineer sports is interesting right now. Interesting. That's what I'm looking for. It's interesting. It really wasn't interesting last month. So it's interesting again. And there's pressure now on this week's game. But yeah, I mean, Steve Slayton might be that good luck charm. They do it for Steve Slayton and nobody else, apparently. So we'll see if Steve Slayton's, the luckiness of Steve Slayton, if he brings that good luck with him from Houston to Morgantown.